Welcome back to RandomRodShop, folks. Well, today we're going to finish up our 5-lug conversion on our 1963 C10. In an earlier video, we did the front, and I'll put a link to that here somewhere. We used the front suspension out of my dad's 1980 Big 10 pickup. Now, it had the heavy-duty suspension with the 1¼ brakes and the 12-bolt rear end. So I did this all outside. Wind was blowing pretty heavy, so I'm going to talk through this video as we go along. Sorry about that. The truck lived most of its life on the dirt roads. Now, as far as I know, it's a 2-owner vehicle, but it hasn't seen much pavement, so I got a wire brush out and I really scraped the threads and put some WD-40 on them, hoping that these things were going to come off. As you can see, I got a 1/2-inch cheater pipe, or I got a 1/2-inch breaker bar and a cheater pipe, and these things fought me tooth and nail all the way to the end. Man, they were exciting. It made me wish that I had it up to the shop so I could use the air gun. Moreover, it made me wish that I had gotten my little trailer out. I got a trailer that's got a generator and a 220-volt air compressor on it that I use to roll around, out in the pasture and stuff and take this stuff apart. But the fuel tank's leaking on it. I was definitely regretting not fixing that fuel tank. You can see I took the clips off, got the emergency brake cable. I've got I went ahead and pulled a shock loose, and I don't show it in the video here, but I pulled the brake lines loose also. The other side wasn't any better. I spent close to an hour taking this whole thing apart. Now that it's just a bed and a frame, it can go back out to the pasture for long-term storage. So the 63, it's got a short narrow bed. It's got a step side bed on it, and I'm gonna put a fleet side bed on it. So I thought, well, I'm gonna do this anyway. So I decided to go ahead and take the bed off, and just to give more room to get this rear end underneath it. Now, because I'm working by myself, I decided to take as much weight off this axle as I could. So I'm pulling the cross pin bolt here. So basically that I can get the axles out. Got the wheels off, got the brake drums off, got the brake assemblies off. The drums on this thing, they were kind of stuck, but it's just been setting for, probably a few decades. I don't know. I've had it for 20 plus years, and the guy I got it from he had it for that long, so I don't know. But that's what I'm working on here. Now, normally that cross shaft will just slide out. It's supposed to just slide out. You can see I'm kind of helping it out with a punch and a hammer here. At this point, I don't know what the problem is, but yeah, I worked on this for, you don't want to mess anything up or anything, but I finally got this thing out. And I think I got a close-up of this pin here. All right, so you can see where the spider has been wearing on that shaft, and that groove right there was what was keeping that pin from coming out. I wouldn't recommend reusing this pin or the spiders that were on this pin. You can just buy them, or quite honestly, you can get some good used ones. Now, I had no idea whether this was the original rear end. 64 was the transition year. From 64 and up, they used a 30 spline axle, and 63 and down, they used a 17 spline. This one was a 17 spline, so I'm assuming it was the original rear end. You can see, cleaning up the Big 10 rear end, basically cutting all the brackets off. I didn't make you watch me grinding these things smooth. We've done that before. Now I'm working on getting the U-bolts off of this 63. Now, if you haven't These weren't that tight. They're inch and a half nuts. They weren't that tight. Taking the pander bar loose, this thing, the nut wasn't that bad, but for whatever reason, this pander bar was stuck in the bracket there. Now, if you've never pulled trailing arms off of these old pickups, ones that's been on there pretty much its whole life, you're in for a treat. I haven't had one yet that those U-bolts are not rusted into the trailing arms. And the easy answer is just cut those U-bolts off and get the rear end out of the way. You can drive them bolts out, douse them with penetrate oil, and you can drive them out. I didn't have a set of U-bolts. I thought I did, but yeah, I didn't have a set of U-bolts for this thing. So I very, very gently worked those things out. Again, that took me a little bit. Definitely just get a pair of U-bolts, cut this thing off. Same thing with the C10. I took those bolts off that C10, or off the Big 10, the 1980, my dad's truck. I went to the effort to unscrew those things. U-bolts were in good shape. I didn't want to mess them up. It's kind of one of those things, might need them. But this job is significantly easier if you just cut the U-bolts on the square body and you cut the U-bolts on this. It's significantly faster to do it that way. Then you can just get a big hammer and drive these things out. You can clean the holes up. Everything's straightforward. You can see I'm still working on this thing, and I cut a lot out of it. It took me a bit to get these things broke loose. In the end, I didn't mess up any threads, didn't mess up the nuts. When I was beating on the bottom, I put the nut back on the bottom so I didn't mess up the threads. I finally got the thing where it was wiggling in the trailing arm. At this point, I think we about got it. That's the driver's side. We still got to go do the passenger side. Like the nuts on the U-bolts for that square body. It wanted to fight the whole way out. Like I said, just cut the U-bolts and call it done. U-bolts are not that expensive. There we go. We got the driver's side out. And it was the same thing on the passenger side. I just cut it all the way to the end. You've seen one side, you've seen them both. They both took quite a bit of time. This is where I was saying that pander bar was it was kind of stuck in there. Not sure why, but eventually it did come out. And you're about to see why I decided to take the axles and the backing plates and the drums and everything else off, because like I said, I'm working by myself, and I forgot to take the brake line off this one, so I just took a pair of dikes and cut it. I'm going to put new brake lines all up and front to back on the thing anyway, and I don't know how old that thing is, so I just cut it off. There we go. We get it off there. And this allows us to, I'm gonna just move it back a little bit. Now we can just set our square body rear end up there. I ordered the spring purchase from Amazon, and I would recommend just order them. They're like 30 bucks or something like that. It's just too easy. set them on there, and put the axle on, and everything's happy. Except that this is a lot easier if you've got someone to help you. In the end, if you're doing this and you got some help, if you think about it, this is a pretty straightforward job. Cut the U-bolts on the square body, cut the U-bolts on this one. Don't take the square body rear end apart, right? Just cut the axle, the spring mounts off, and cut the shock mounts off, grind it down. That's probably where most of the time for this conversion is going to be. And it's just cleaning up the square body rear end. That's really all there is to it. I want to go ahead and I stick the U-bolts in this thing, and that's just to keep the rear end up there, right? So it doesn't fall on my head. Now I'm trying to just eyeball it, right? I got the tape out, and just sort of get it centered. I want to get the pumpkin up. You'll see in a minute. I take a ratchet strap and wrap it around the pumpkin and kind of hold it up about where it is. I've watched a number of the, like you guys probably, I've watched a number of the YouTube videos where these guys do this conversion, and I have no idea, to be honest with you, why you would, I don't know why you'd weld those perches on before you put this rear end in. Even if you're not changing anything, just kind of get it in there close, and it doesn't even have to be close, but makes me feel better if I got it in there a little close. Tighten up the U-bolts, get the truck back together, right? You want all the weight that you're going to have on a truck, so put it all back together, line it up left to right, put your pinion angle where it needs to be, and then tack those stinking mounts in. That way it's going to be right. And it saves a lot of hassle. Invariably, at least when I first started doing this, I tried to match up the factory, and in the end I lowered it, or I changed the geometry, and you have to basically put a wedge under your pads, or you have to cut them off. I wouldn't do any of that. Actually, I don't do any of that. Just put the pads on there, don't weld them, get the axle close, get it on the ground, and when you get your engine and tranny and the bed and everything else back on it, get back under there and position that rear end, right, left to right. And I do it off measuring I measure from the trailing arms to the end of the axle, right? So I should have, in the other video we figured out what that was like the distance between trailing arms. I think it was 42.5. I have to go look, but set the distance between your trailing arms and get it equal distance from the backing plates on each side, and that's where it is going to be left to right. You don't measure from your truck or anything because you haven't got the pantard bar in there, so you just want to make sure those trailing arms are where they need to be relative to that axle. And at this point, this is where I'm holding the pinion up. So I'm holding it in place, and I'm going to tighten the nuts up on the U-bolts just so that axle doesn't move. Yeah, I'm using the Milwaukee Impact. Just a couple of broops on it. It's snug. It's not tight. Again, I'm going to loosen it all back up when this thing gets closer to being having all the parts on it. But it'll work for right now. So stick the backing plates back on. Now it's mounted. I can put this whole thing back together. This is there's no magic in any of in what's going on now. Put the backing plates back on. Put the axles back in. Put the cross shaft back in, and put the cross shaft bolt back in. Put the cover on. Put some tires on. That's where we're headed. The one thing about putting these axles in is you know, the axles slide in and they're splined and they go into the side gears in the differential. If you just push the axle in, invariably you'll push that side gear out, and you know it'll come out of its place, and then you'll have to pull the axle back out and get it back in. It's just easier. Hold your hand on the side gear and wiggle the axle until it all goes together. Not catastrophic if you don't do it that way, but it just hold the side gear in so you can get it lined up and get it shoved in. Slide the C-clips in, right? Put an axle in, put the C-clip in. Make sure you push the axle outboard, and that'll seat that C-clip in a recess that's in that side gear, and it won't come out. Same thing on the passenger side. If you're unfamiliar with it, the cross pin that goes down the center of that differential housing is what keeps those axles pushed apart, which keeps that C-clip in the recess. That bolt I just showed you, that's the cross pin bolt. Yeah, hang on a little bit longer. We're going to take a little time and tell you a story about the cross pin bolt. So, I was trying to get the cross pin in, and I had the ratchet strap tied to the pinion, and it wouldn't rotate. So that's why I did it. But at this point, the U-bolts are all tightened up, holding the axle, so it's not going to move. This thing goes together. My dad's rear end, it had a good cross shaft in it, and it just slid in. The bolt, I had to go find another bolt, and that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about in a minute. Now, the one thing to remember on this bolt, it's just a 5/16. Right? It's a bolt, you know, maybe 2 inches long. It's got the threads on it's only like 1/2 inch. The rest of it is machined down into like a pin. The pin goes through the cross shaft into the other side of the housing to keep that cross shaft from coming out. Do not over torque that bolt. 5/16. I mean, it's a grade 8, but 20 to 25 foot-pounds is more than sufficient. If you're paranoid about it, clean it up with some brake clean and put just a dot of blue Loctite on it. That's enough. Just don't break the bolt. Got the wheels. I have no idea. I put all the lug bolts in one of my little doggy treat bowls, and I set them up so I knew where they were going to be. Obviously, I forgot. So here's the truck setting up. I'm pretty happy with it. 5 lugs all the way around. Like I said before, this is a pretty straightforward swap. Let me, I'm gonna turn the camera around now, and I'm gonna put a differential up here on the bench, and I want to talk about it. All right, here's a carrier. This one happens to be out of an 8.6, but well, we've talked about in the past. You know, it's a 12 bolt. This is the pin. All right, that goes through here, and you line that hole up with the cross bolt pin. Right, and you screw it in there, and that's what holds that thing in there. We stick it in there. Now, this is a more modern one. You know, here's the head off of the 60s one. It's just a 1/2 inch wrench. But you can see that goes through the cross pin, and it actually goes into a blind hole on this side. So imagine, if you will, what happens if that pin is broke. So I've torn apart a lot of rear ends, and in my whole time of tearing these apart, I've only found one of these broke. And it was in the 78 Camaro I still got sitting out there, and the rear end's still sitting right underneath it. You know, it's out, but it's sitting right beside it. I just like, but was the only one I ever run across. This weekend, I took apart the 67 because I was curious what ring gear it had in it, and again, I was checking the axles, see if it was a 67 or newer or 63 and older. So I was going to pop the axles out and have a look. I pulled the bolt out, and this isn't it actually, but the pin was broke. On the 67, the cross pin was pretty loose in the housing, so I'm like, fine. So I took a die grinder, you know, my little Makita grinder, and I just cut a slot here enough. I finally got that pin out, and so I was able to get the shaft out. And I thought, okay, well, that's no harm, no foul. The housing, I wouldn't have reused the housing anyway. Well, I got to my dad's pickup, that 80, and you know, I'm pulling it out because that was the one I want to lighten, so it's a little easier to put underneath that 63. And sure enough, I pulled the bolt out, and that's all I got. This stayed up in there. Now, if you don't want to tear it up, it's a blind hole, right? There's no good way to get that thing out. What I ended up doing, I'm not sure. I just wanted to save my dad's pickup, you know, the rear axle of my dad's pickup. But what I ended up doing is hanging that rear end such that this was pointing down. You know, I hung it from the axle, you know, with the tractor, had a chain hooked on the axle itself, so it would pull the axle away from this cross pin, you know, so that there wasn't any, the weight of the axle wasn't pushing on the cross pin. And I sat there and I wiggled that thing back and forth, and we're talking, I don't know, 1/16 of an inch maybe, back and forth. And I rolled it back and forth, and I rolled it. I kept squirting WD-40 in there because it's filled with 90 weight, right? I think about an hour later, this pin actually dropped out of that hole, just like it, you know, effectively just like it did. You know, it finally dropped out. Anyway, the point of this story is that pin is loose enough in there, right? It is loose enough in this shaft that you should be able to wiggle it out. I'm not saying that's the right answer. If you got another carrier, right, or if you got another rear end, I don't know how to get it out other than letting gravity take it out without tearing this thing up. I don't know. I thought maybe a magnet or super glue or whatever, but yeah, I don't know. Not sure. Gravity got it out. If you got options, that's not the path I'd go down. But if you need to save it, it should come out without cutting this thing. I think I saw Brent at Half-Ass Customs one time. He cut that thing out, and I just don't remember if he welded that pin back in there or how he ended up holding the pin back in there. But be that as it may, I'd prefer to get it out. If you have a better method and you've actually got it to work, leave in the comments. I would definitely appreciate that. Well, I appreciate you watching. I hope you found this interesting. This is actually a pretty straightforward project. If you're interested in, you know, how I put the steering box on, the link ought to pop up here pretty quick. But until next time, I'm Random at RandomRodShop. I'm out of here.